good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see all of you. Today is February 26, 2018. This is the regular meeting of the Board of Water Supply. I do note for the record that we are one member short of quorum, so we are going to be in information only until, and we do expect one more to walk in any minute, but until then it'll be information only, and so we will skip for now the items requiring board action. We'll proceed to the items for information. And first up is the Board of Water Supply Financial Plan and Rate Study Update. Chair recognizes Joe Cooper, Waterworks Controller, and David Ebersold of CDM Smith.
Good afternoon, board members. I'm going to present an update on our financial plan and water rate study. We've been doing this every month for about a year now. And my topic is to, in your board pack, you will actually find a draft of our financial plan document. I'm going to kind of review that in overview. These are the 6 sections that we will be discussing. And we have been reviewing this, like I said, with the board and with our stakeholder advisory group. It's composed of 6 sections. And it kind of helps in as part of our larger planning effort, which includes our water master plan, our strategic planning, and our vision and mission statements. Like I said, it begins with our 30-year capital improvement plan. This consists of a shorter 5-year planning horizon, which we're considering rates, a longer 10-year financial planning model, which goes into more detail of our financial plan, and then a longer 30-year financial plan. I can point out that a lot of the drivers of this financial plan are capital improvements and is pipelines, and the brown area is our expected pipeline replacement costs over the next 30 years. You can see that in the earlier years we do have some other non-potable storage facilities, sources, activities planned. The black line represents PL2, which is our pipeline replacement scenario number 2, which was selected by the board for our financial modeling. Please feel free to ask me any questions as I go through this. Yes?
Joe, could you just quickly explain what PL2 means?
Oh, yes, of course. PL2 is, our goal is to replace 21 miles of pipeline a year, and PL2 targets us to reach that goal in about 10 years from now, so that in 10 years we will have ramped up our staffing and our efforts to be replacing 21 miles a year. 21 miles, we have 2,100 miles of pipeline, and the AWWA, American Water Works Association, target or benchmark is that you would replace about 1% of your pipelines a year. And so that for us, that would be about 21 miles a year. The third part of our financial plan concerns our operating expenses. This starts with actually forecasting our operating expenses at $137 million in 2018, which is 85% of our budgeted amount and mirrors closely what our historical spend rate is. We expect that over the next 10 years that this will ramp up to about $179 million or $97 million in expenses. And the red line at the top, as I said, we will be increasing our pipeline replacement. The CIP capital improvement implementation allowance, we've added just a small amount on top of our normal operating expenses in anticipation that we may contract out either contract management services or hire additional staff to allow us to complete the implementation of our capital project plans. The next part of our financial plan is our financial policies. These were approved by the board in May of last year. The first one is our fund balance or working capital. Our target is to have 180 days of cash on hand. This target is supposed to be reached in our plan in 10 years, but it's also to never have less than 60 days of working capital on hand. And this is to allow us to pay our normal operating costs and also to have enough cash on hand should emergencies occur. Our second policy is the purposes and uses of debt. And basically, we will use long-term debt to finance long-term assets, and short-term debt will only be used to handle cash flow management issues. Our third policy is our debt to net asset ratio, and that describes how much we can borrow, and basically we will borrow 50% or less of our net assets can be used as debt. And finally, we have a debt service coverage ratio. This is a standard ratio in lending and really describes our ability to pay back our loans. We have two ratios that we target. One is our senior debt coverage ratio, which is 1.7%. And so this is on our senior debt, normally our municipal bonds, and really refers to the fact that our revenue will cover on an annual basis 1.7 times our annual debt service coverage. And so this is obviously important to our bondholders and helps keep our borrowing costs and interest rates lower. We also have an all-in coverage ratio of 1.6. This includes other debt or loans such as state revolving loan funds that we may also incur. In Section 5, we start to build our 10-year forecast, and again, we do this by adding the two costs that I just described, our capital costs and our operating costs, and then we use different financing strategies to help drive down those costs. The total cost of capital and operating is a term we use, revenue requirement. That's the revenue that we're required to receive to cover our costs, and again, we use financing strategies, different loans or bonds to help drive down that cost to make it more affordable for our customers. This shows our current revenue with no adjustments at the bottom, and so if we were to make no adjustments into our revenue requirements, you can see that our revenue requirements actually go up over the next 10 years. Again, over 5 years, we expect that our revenue requirement will go up about 12.5% in total over 5 years. And you can see that it goes up about 2% a year in 2020 and 2021, and then the revenue requirement goes up to about 4% a year in 2022 and 2023. This is the only period, this is the 5-year period is the time we focus in more detail. We do carry out our revenue requirement and our financial plan to 10 years, and again, apply our different financing strategies to help control that revenue requirement. And over 10 years, we will probably be issuing about 50% of our capital improvement projects with bonds or financing bonds for our capital improvement projects. Yes?
Yes, Joe, the 5-year increase of 12.5%, that's over 5 years, right? It's not every year.
That's correct. That's over 5 years. And so that was an anticipated 2% a year and then 4% a year for the other 4 years. And in the first year, there's 0% increase.
Thanks.
I just want to also clarify that doesn't translate into rate increases for particular customer classes. This is the overall.
I'm just, yes, on our financial plan, we're just talking about how much money we need to operate. That we haven't translated this into a rate scenario. Actually, Dave will be discussing some of our rate planning in the next presentation. But this is just for, yes, the amount of revenue we need to cover our costs. We used a lot of assumptions in building our long-range model, our financial model. A lot of these have been are built on our water master plan and our financial policies, and then on some information that we know. We had projections from the Department of Health on how much they may be loaning us in state revolving fund loans over the next 20 years. Then our debt issues, our bond terms are kind of known. Our days of working capital we described in our policies. The water demand is an amount taken from our water master plan. So this is where these plans work in conjunction, in that our water master plan helps to tell us what we need to build physically, and the financial plan tries to build on that as to how we cover those costs in a financing strategy. Again, this is over 30 years. You can see that our current revenue with no adjustments would continue, and like everything else, costs do tend to go up. This includes not only inflation, but other cost factors, increasing our staffing to be able to implement our capital improvements to provide safe, dependable, and affordable water to all our customers on Oahu. And this projects out the revenue adjustments that may be needed over this 30-year plan. And in general, these revenue adjustments average between 4.5% and 6% a year. Again, this is a projection over 30 years, and there is some uncertainty in that, but it is our best guess and our best approximation as to what we will be required to receive at that period of time. Finally, we went above and beyond what most water agencies do in projecting, in developing a 30-year water master or 30-year financial plan. And some of this, the impetus was to be in conjunction with the 30-year water master plan. So we developed six planning scenarios to see what financial tools we would have to deal with the different issues that we may encounter over the next 30 years. And this describes those issues, whether it's aggressive conservation, which could reduce our revenue, aggressive growth, which could put more demand on our infrastructure, natural disasters such as hurricanes, tsunamis, source contamination, climate change, which is a topic that sometimes gets coverage, and then just economic cycles, such as the recent recession that we had of 2008. In general, we feel that using the Water Master Plan scorecard and other available metrics to us, we can assess the changing situations and react to those. We have the tools available to be able to take action and are adequate, and our commitment to this planning process gives us high confidence that we can handle the scenarios that we anticipate. That concludes my presentation. Are there any other questions or comments?
So if I could add that the attached in the board's packet is a draft of the long-range financial plan that we would like to solicit comments from the board over the next month, and depending on the amount of comments we receive, if the board is comfortable in March for possible consideration by adoption by the board of our long-range financial plan. This is not the water rate package.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Members, any questions? Okay. But, so Ernie, the long-range financial plan certainly will be considered when we put together the rate package for the next 5 years.
Yes, that is correct. So they all fit together, so they're working together. The Water Master Plan, the 30-year capital program, the long-range financial plan, the rate package, and also the water system facilities charges.
Okay. All right, great.
Thank you.
And just, yes, to add to that, yes, the financial plan gives, again, the revenue requirements. The rate plan, which will be a separate document, but which is obviously related, will separate out, it will show in more detail the rate proposals.
So one thing, too, that's a little different with the long-range financial plan, the water rates, we're looking at the next 5-year increment of water rates scheduled increases. The long-range financial plan really looks 10 years ahead, projects out operating and maintenance costs and also capital costs. And then also looks from year 11 to year 30, instead of looking in detail, looks at potential scenarios that might occur that could affect the revenue of the Board of Water Supply, which comes from our customers, and how we might adjust things and address those things. So it does some scenario planning for years 11 to 30.
Okay, so that the decisions we make today is considering the long-term future of the agency and our water system.
Yes, that's true, and it's also very important to kind of keep this forward look, this long-term look on our finances, because we have to operate financially self-sufficient like a business.
And yes, there's no decisions today, but we would like you to review the plan in your packet and be able to, submit comments to the manager if you have any on how that is, and hopefully maybe you can adopt it next month.
All right, thank you.
If there's no further questions, Dave Eversole, CDM Smith will walk you through some of the rate setting policies and practices.
Thank you, Joe. Chair Andia, members of the board. I wanted to pick up where we were in January. In January, we spent quite a bit of time together going over some major policy issues with regard to water rates. Hopefully those icons and topics that are up on the screen look familiar. And in that workshop, you provided some important guidance to staff on how to proceed on each of these issues. So I wanted to give you an update on where that is headed. So the first, one of the items on the list is the monthly customer charge by meter size, and the guidance that you provided was to move to this customer meter charge by meter size. Currently, the board uses a billing charge that's the same for all customers. It's an amount of $9.26 per month, regardless of the size of a customer's meter. Keep in mind that larger meters have higher costs associated with them to maintain and keep those appropriately functioning. And so the idea of changing this to a charge that varies by meter size is more appropriate with recovering the costs associated with those larger meters. So moving towards that type of a structure would look like this. In fiscal year 19, which begins on July 1st of this year, there wouldn't be any changes to the rates for that charge. Beginning fiscal year 20, which is July 1st, 2019, it would go to varying by meter size, starting at $10.42 for a 5/8 or 3/4 inch meter, which is the typical size for a single family residence. And then moving up to a top of $541 for a 12-inch meter. I think there's only 1 or 2 meters up in that size category. In general, 8 inches is the largest common size out in the system. And then this shows how that might change over the coming years out through the 5-year rate setting period that Joe made reference to. Any questions on this one? Okay, another area where you provided guidance was on the fire meter standby charge. Currently, properties that have a fire meter, that is a meter that's dedicated for private fire service, like a sprinkler system, currently those, the usage from those meters is billed at $4.96 per 1,000 gallons. And again, as was mentioned, since rates wouldn't be changing in the first year, that would stay the same in FY 2019. And the board currently recovers about $70,000 of costs through that charge right now. But in aggregate, it costs about $400,000 to service these meters, maintain them each year. And so the idea here is that creating a charge that's only paid by those customers with fire meters and varying it by meter size, because again, the larger the meter, the more costs are associated with it. It's a pretty modest charge, starting out at $6.72 for a 2-inch or smaller meter in 2020, and then peaking out at $52.94 in 2023 for an 8-inch meter.
And this is a flat charge per month.
Flat
correct?
charge per month, and the usage charge that's currently in place would go away. Any questions on this one?
David, can we go back to the last slide? So on the 5/8 to 3/4 inch meter size, about what's the percentage of our customers fall in that category?
The vast majority. Yeah, pretty much, most single-family residences are all 5/8 and 3/4 inch meters. You see some of these larger meter sizes typically when you move into multi-unit housing and non-residential customers.
And for the multi-unit housing, it would be a larger meter size, but it would service all of the units in that development or building.
Typically, a single meter serves all of the units in one building, yes. Anything else on this?
Nope.
Moving forward? And anything else on monthly fire meter standby charge? Okay, then let's talk about some of the other areas where you provided guidance. This lists the different rate elements in the first column, single family and multi-unit cost of service, the tiers within those residential rate categories, recycled and non-potable water, agricultural rates, and non-residential rates. Going back up to the top, the second column then is the guardrails or guidance that you provided back in January. And with regard to cost of service for residential customers, be they single family or multifamily, the guidance was to move closer to the cost of service. And let me explain what that means. Currently, single family residential customers are subsidized. Their rates don't recover all the money that's needed to serve them. And as a result, they pay about 88% of their cost of service. So they get about a 12% subsidy overall. Multi-unit or multifamily residential customers, those rates are currently recovering a little bit more revenue than is needed to meet their cost of service. And so the guidance was to try and move single family, to try and eliminate some of that subsidy and move them closer to their cost of service, while at the same time reducing the amount of money that multifamily pays. The way we're looking at tackling that in an initial set of alternatives is to gradually make those types of changes. And so single-family residential starts off in FY19 at the current rate, about 88% of the cost of service, and we would foresee gradually ramping that up to 95% by 2023. And similarly with multifamily, move the opposite direction, so from a current level of 108 down to 100% in 2023. And it's important to keep these transitions smooth so as to not have anyone's experience, big dramatic swings in their rates in any given year. Then moving to the next topic then on residential tiers, looking at the guidance was to establish an essential needs tier. This would be an initial increment of water usage, say 2,000 gallons a month, that would be priced below the cost of service, and that amount of water would be available to everyone regardless of income. So the first 2,000 gallons at a pretty low price. Balance that with increases in the second tier so that if for a person who uses about 6,000 gallons of water a month, and about half of your customers use 6,000 gallons a month or less, they would see only modest increases overall. And then couple that with some shifts in the tiers to be more encouraging of water conservation. Of course, doing all this while avoiding rate shock to any particular customer and trying to get some parity or equivalency between the pricing of the essential needs tier between single family and multifamily customers. So there's a lot in that one. I thought it might be helpful when we start talking about tier shifts, and if we're going to be encouraging of conservation, what that means is that the more water you use, the more you pay. This map shows the general locations of customers who are using more than 30,000 gallons a month. Each square there, each colored square is about a half a mile on each side. And the colors of those squares correspond to the number of customers in there who are using more than 30,000 gallons a month. So the lighter yellow color means there's between 1 and 4 customers at that usage level. And the darkest of those colors, there's between 48 and 74 customers using over 30,000 gallons per month. These are approximately the highest, 2 or 3% of your customers in the entire system. And it gives you a sense of where those customers are located.
Dave, can we go back to the slide that says all residential alternatives have similar cost of service recovery?
Yes.
So these, when you look at these percentages, these aren't the rate increases either, right?
These are not rate increases either. So here's the thing. If, as Joe mentioned, the board needs a 12.5% overall increase in revenue, okay, over the next 5-year period. If we're at the same time increasing the cost of service recovery, like in single-family residential, then those rate increases would be more than 12.5%. Alternatively, if the cost of service recovery is decreasing, in this instance for multifamily residential customers, then we would expect their rate increases to be less. They'd be moving the opposite direction.
But not necessarily drop in these percentages shown
No.
here.
And at a future meeting, I expect next month, we'll be able to talk about some specific numbers with you.
Right.
Okay.
Good questions. Then moving back to the next pieces on recycled and non-potable water, the guidance was to increase those rates to recover more of the cost of service, but to do so gradually and in a manner so as to not discourage the use of recycled water. We've initially taken a look at moving that to recovering 80% of the cost of service by 2023. Our initial look at that suggests that may be a little too aggressive, with rates going up a little too fast in some of the subsets of recycled water that you have. So we're doing some further evaluation on that. For agricultural rates, the guidance was to retain the existing subsidy levels. Keep in mind that agricultural customers currently pay about 60% of their cost of service. The community values perspective on that is that people value local fresh produce, that it's important to not only the health of our residents, our customers, but also an important component in sustainability and security. So that's an important value. And then with regard to non-residential rates, non-residential customers, all our businesses, hotels, industry, they're currently charged the same amount per 1,000 gallons regardless of their usage, and the guidance was to keep that general structure the same. So we've looked at that and said, well, everybody's rates should go up some, if even a small amount, and so we're looking at alternatives to accomplish that. Any questions on these other items?
So it's important to point out in red on the bottom draft for illustration discussion purposes only. So from now till next month, things might shift a little bit here.
So with all of these things, let's just kind of recap on what it is we're trying to do with these types of changes. And I think hopefully this looks very much in line with the guidance that you provided at the January workshop. First, providing an essential needs tier. Next, encouraging conservation. Water conservation is a very important part of the long-term sustainability strategy for Oahu. Reducing the subsidy to single-family residential customers. Bringing multifamily or multi-unit customers down to their cost of service. Making these changes while also avoiding rate shock, which is too sudden of a change to any one type of customer. And then no free ride. All rates need to go up some. Future items for consideration, as Joe mentioned, the adoption of the long-range financial plan, and then we also anticipate soon bringing consideration of updates to the water system facilities charge before your board. And lastly, there's a series of public hearings that are being scheduled with regard to proposed changes of water rates, and those dates, locations, and times are all shown here. There's 4 of them. They're planned at different locations around the island with the hope that everybody will have the opportunity to attend one of these 4 hearings. Any questions?
Yeah, Dave, can you go back to Joe's presentation, actually? It's the slide on the 30-year capital improvement program.
Yes.
Since we're talking about, rates and revenue requirements, I'd like to tie this all back to the long-range planning.
Almost there. There you go.
So basically, these revenue requirements, additional revenue requirements we talked about, and the rates to support those requirements. When I look at this graph, I'm just kind of trying to figure this out. Is a lot of the reason in the increase in revenue requirements related to fixing the pipelines to prevent water main breaks?
Right. So that's actually the biggest driver in the 30-year capital improvement program. Currently, the board is replacing about 6 miles of pipeline per year. And as was mentioned, that is needing to ramp up to about 21 miles per year. So this dollar figure here of about $250 million a year provides enough revenue to accomplish that ramp up. I think it is important to note that these are all in 2016 or 17 dollars, so they're uninflated dollars, which is why it flattens out. When you look at the numbers that Joe was showing in the 30-year projection, those are inflated dollars, which is why they continue to rise. But yes, I think the other part that's really important to mention in the 30-year capital improvement program, in addition to that ramp up to 21 miles a year, which you're right is designed specifically to help reduce main breaks, is the projects up in this front area. And you can see in particular the dark blue category of pumps. That's kind of the heart of the water system, and there's some high priority pump projects in there to make sure that water's flowing where it needs to be, when it needs to be there. And then some alternate sources. You can see in the yellow, there's a couple of big humps in there with some important source diversification and growth-related source development projects in there.
Okay, thank you. So that it's a pretty aggressive priority then to address our aging infrastructure.
Absolutely. Can't do one without the other.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, any questions? Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Let's see, I do note that we have a quorum at this time. And so I'd like to return to the items requiring board action. And the first item is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held January 22nd, 2018. It's been moved. Is there a second? Okay, second. Yeah. Okay. All right. Moved and seconded for approval. Is there any discussion? Corrections, amendments, additions? All right. All those in favor of approval say aye. All those opposed say nay. Okay. Minutes are approved. Next item for board action is the adoption of resolution number 884, 2018 on the acceptance of gifts to the Board of Water Supply from various donors in support of the 2018 Water Conservation Week program.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like Kathleen Elliott Pahinui, our Information Officer, to provide the report this month.
Thank you. Thank you, Manager Lau, Chair Andaya, board members. Your Communications Office recommends the adoption of Resolution number 884. We're very fortunate to have about a dozen donors this year, so DexCo will be providing $2,500 and Hard Rock Cafe $2,000, both of in-kind donations for our annual award ceremony on May 9th. And Board Member Sasamura came last year, and the food was pretty good. So we're hoping all the board can join us this year. We also have donations from Hawaiian Tel Federal Credit Union in the amount of $2,000. Friends of Halava Xeriscape, $2,000. Times Supermarket, $2,000. Alexander and Baldwin, $1,000. Aloha Pacific Federal Credit Union, $1,000. Hawaii Energy, $1,000. And Pasha Hawaii, $500. And all of these donations help offset the printing of the calendar, as well again as for the event, awards event that we hold for the students. We are currently celebrating our 40th anniversary for our poster contest and our 10th anniversary for our poetry contest. Any questions?
Members, any questions? Very
Thank you.
generous. I believe we need a action on this. Is there, can we entertain a motion to approve?
It's resolution number 884, 2018.
Yes. Okay, moved and seconded for approval. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor of approval say aye. All those opposed say nay. All right, resolution number 884, 2018 is approved.
Mahalo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving right along here, we're going to go back to our agenda for items for information, and we are on item number 2, which is the legislative update of the State of Hawaii legislative session. Manager Lau?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to introduce our legislative liaison, Kathy Mitchell. Actually, Kathy, if you can go to the podium. As you know, the legislative session started in January, and it's been quite a busy session this year. So I'd like maybe Kathy to quickly cover the House bill and Senate bills that we're tracking and testifying on. Thank you.
Aloha. So these are the bills that, we have 6 pages of bills we've been following, and some of them were introduced in 2017, some were introduced 2018. The first 2 bills we were opposed to, that's House Bill 215, that's where if there is a complaint by a customer, they have the water utility has 72 hours to respond, and if they don't respond, then the court can award treble damages, which is triple the cost. And so we're opposed to that. And of course, House Bill 577 is requiring non-referendum, statewide referendum on community water fluoridation, and there's a ordinance out that prohibits any chemical or anything that in the water, so we're opposed to that. And we have some bills that are in conference. Page 2, House Bill 628, that provides for infrastructure construction financing, and that bill is referred to 2018 session, and it doesn't have to be heard until conference time. And at that time, during conference, they do not accept written testimony. It's just the House and the Senate conferees meet, and they discuss among themselves what they're going to do, if they're going to pass, make revisions to the bill. House Bill 630, we were in support of that. That appropriates funds for county drought mitigation projects. House Bill 631 is, it provides funds to that's the water management, the Commission on Water Management.
Commission on Water Resource Management,
Yes.
the State Water Commission.
So we supported that. 634, House Bill 634 and House Bill 635, we are very much interested in. And it crossed over the House, from the House to the Senate, and it's now in the Committee of Ways and Means. And what this bill does, it provides for special purpose revenue bonds for the dam repair, and also a component of that is for recharge.
So this is access to state issuing special purpose revenue bonds on behalf of the Board of Water Supply we would be responsible for the debt service repayment, but hopefully by working through the state, we can access lower interest rates on the bonds. This is to meet dam safety standards for these two regulated dams, Nuuanu Reservoir Number 1 and Nuuanu Reservoir Number 4. Number 4 is where we used to have catfish fishing, so those dams do need some repair work.
On page 3, House Bill 636, that's a bill that's in conference. It's a water conservation program establishing a 2-year financial assistance pilot program, so we're in support. House Bill 838, the House bill passed the water and with amendments and referred to the Finance Committee, and that's also a 2-year pilot program in the Department of Land and Natural Resources that enables public-private partnerships to provide funds for projects that increase water security. House Bill 1536, another bill that went to conference. It's for irrigation, and it's to provide for agriculture and for distribution of water. Also, it gives the Department of Agriculture eminent domain to provide non-potable water for agricultural use. House Bill 1582, this was referred to the Finance Committee. It's a constitutional amendment to ensure clean drinking water. We're in support of that. House Bill 1708 requires the Department of Health to study the protection of waters in the state, statewide. So we're monitoring and tracking that. I would like to make a correction on page 4. There's a bill, House Bill 1934. That's environmental protection, relating to environmental protection, and it relates to, it prohibits injection well approval. And so it's not supposed to be supports, it's opposed. We're opposed to that.
One of the reasons for that is actually, and I think the bill focuses on the Maui injection well situation there in Lahaina. But for us, we are looking at the potential for stormwater capture and recharging the aquifer using injection wells. So this bill was to actually ban all injection wells in the state. So we think there is appropriate use of injection wells where it's carefully regulated and studied by the Department of Health. So we changed our position to oppose.
Yes, we're opposed to it, so you could pencil that in. House Bill 1984, this is a water security, directs the Commission on Water Resource Management to conduct a statewide water security study, examining past, the current, and future water needs until 2050. House Bill 2091 is Homeland Security. The Board of Water Supply is in support. In June of 2016, we entered into a memorandum of understanding and partnered with the Hawaii State Fusion Center. And so the Hawaii State Fusion Center is intelligence, their role is intelligence gathering. House Bill 2470, Environmental Protection, we're in support of that bill. And House Bill 2540 requires, this is cesspools. We're opposed to this one. You want to explain this one?
I'll explain this bill. So the bill, in its first form, used the word shall, having the Department of Health actually work with the county water agencies to do on-bill repayment of loans to decommission cesspools or replace cesspools in the state. And they, through legislative action, we're going to mandate that it shall be on our water bill. I expressed concerns about that, and I believe they've kind of provided a little bit, not change the shall to may or authorize, so we can continue the discussions with the Department of Health. As you know, over 80% of our bills have a combined water and wastewater charge on there, and the wastewater charge is clearly not Board of Water Supply's charge, but the Department of Environmental Services. This would have added a third component of a cesspool loan repayment cost or payment to that water bill, and it would have created a lot of administrative and loan processing challenges there because we're not really geared to do processing of loans and payment of loans, especially when it comes to what if a customer failed to make those loan payments, what kind of collection action on that loan would happen. I think the legislature heard us and made some appropriate changes.
They changed it to May. House Bill 2595, this is for watersheds, provides appropriation of funds to support DLNR watershed improvements. We're in support of that. House Bill 2712, underground storage tanks. That passed the first committee with HD1. It went to Health and Human Services, the next committee. I believe they kind of indicated that they saw the Senate bill moving. They have a Senate Bill 2930. So that bill was deferred in the House, and today, Senate Bill 2930 SD1 was heard by the Commerce and Consumer Protection and Health, Senator Baker's committee, and it is passing over to the House. This is the underground storage tanks. It proposes protective capabilities of secondary containment, and the secondary containment are in place within a 10-year time frame. The Senator Baker's committee today is blanking out the dates so we can continue in further the discussions.
And in particular, this tries to address the situation of the Navy's underground Red Hill fuel storage tanks.
Did you want to add, there was a recent judgment?
Yeah, as you probably saw in the newspaper, there was a decision by the judge in the case of the Sierra Club versus the State of Hawaii Department of Health. So we're monitoring that situation very closely, and we're glad that Senator Baker's committee did pass this bill forward, even though they blanked out all the dates, to allow for further discussion on this very important issue about protecting our drinking water resources.
On page 5, you have Senate Bill 633. This is a water security financing bill. It establishes a water security fee on water withdrawn from municipal and private water systems, and establishes a water security fund administered by the Commission on Water Resource Management. We were opposed to this one. Senate Bill 635, Water Conservation Program, and it's a 2-year water conservation financial assistance pilot program to provide financial assistance to county-owned public water systems. We were in support of that. Senate Bill 1259, HD1. This is a bill that was introduced in 2017 session. It was held by the Committee on Commerce and Consumer Protection and Health. It's another underground storage tanks, but as stated earlier, Senate Bill 2930 SD1 is moving out of committee. Senate Bill 1275 is an irrigation bill. It amends the definition of public utility not to include the Board of Water Supply. This is for the production and conveyance of water for human consumption. Senate Bill 2930, we've already addressed. It's passing out of committee. Senate Bill 3068, Senate Draft 1. It's a very ambitious bill, 70 pages long. I believe the Department of Land and Natural Resource did a study on climate change. The Hawaii Sea Level Rise Vulnerability and Adaptation Report. And so what the bill does, it directs each state agency, each department and agency to assess their regulatory framework in support of the redevelopment of urban areas. And the bill is moving, but pretty much the state departments at this point, they weren't aware that it was going to be all state department and agencies. A very ambitious bill, but it's moving to further discussion. And lastly, on February 16th, that was the first lateral deadline. The measures that were still alive went to the last committee, respective committees, and that's going to be moving out, right now, they're in a 5-day recess from February 22nd to the 28th, and allow the committees to continue hearing the bills, and that'll be considered for first crossover on March 9th. Are there any questions?
Members, any questions?
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you for the report. All right, moving on to the next item. Item number 3, Capital Improvement Program Quarterly Update.
Thank you, Chair. We're going to have Jason Takaki, the Program Administrator for our Capital Projects Division, to provide this quarter's report.
Good afternoon, Chair Andaya and board members. What you have before you is the second quarter report of the Capital Improvement Program. Encompasses all projects for all divisions up to December 31st, 2017. In the second quarter, there were a total of 18 contracts awarded for a total of $23.4 million. And the detail of those projects is on the following page, along with the list of projects that were completed during the quarter. Are there any questions I can answer for you?
Can you just give us a quick rundown? Are we running, on budget? Are we, is the spending?
We are very close to budget at this point. I think one of the things you'll notice on the listing of the budget versus the award amounts on the second page is that a lot of the budget amounts are exactly the same. And that's because these are projects that are budgeted under blanket line items, whether it's pump renewal and repair or facilities repair. So though they allocate dollars for the projects individually out of this lump sum that's been appropriated by the board. We have found, though, that a lot of the bid amounts have been very close to the estimated amounts, so it's much different from just a few years prior. It is very close to what we're estimating. We're not seeing the escalation of costs that we had in the past few years.
Okay, it seems like the variance is very small percentage.
Yeah, they are. They are right now, and it's still early in the game.
So we might be seeing kind of a slowing of the construction industry, so giving our projects better pricing when they come in for bid.
But yeah, in the past, where all bids have exceeded what we anticipated to be the budgeted amount, we're very close this year so far.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Any questions? All right. Next item, item number 4, recruitment status update.
Thank you, Chair. Michelle from our head of our Human Resources Office will provide the report this month.
Good afternoon, Board Chair and Board members. I am here to provide you with the second quarter recruitment status update. Before you, you have the 2 standard reports regarding our recent recruitment for the period of November 2017 through January 2018. For the quarter of November 2017 through January 2018, we had 22 new hires, 3 promotions, 26 separations, 49 new approvals to fill, and 2 canceled requests. It's important to note that of the 26 separations that occurred over the quarter, that 16 of those were retirements. So although we are very active right now in our recruitment processes and new hires, we did have quite a few retirements at the end of the year, which is typical in December of each calendar year. Any questions?
Members, any questions? Thank you. All right, moving on. Item number 5, status update of groundwater levels at all index stations.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to have Barry Usagawa, head of our Water Resources Division, provide the report. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and members, for the January of 2018, we have one well still in caution, that's Honolulu, barely in caution. Pumpage was about 135 million gallons per day. typical for the winter months. We've had, although January's rainfall was 58% of normal, our 5-month moving average is 85%. Last 3 months, October, November, December, where rainfall was at normal, so it's been, as you know, it's been raining. So it's a good thing for water resources. The forecast for the spring is above normal rainfall still through March, April, and May. And our monitoring wells are exhibiting high head levels due to the decreased pumpage and the rainfall. That's my report.
Okay, members, any questions? All right,
Thank you.
moving on is Watermain repair report for January 2018. Chair recognizes Mr. Mike Fuki.
Good afternoon, Chair and Diane, and members of the board. During the month of January, we had quite a number of main breaks, up to 43 in comparison to the 3 previous months. Significant breaks that we had occurred the latter part of the month, January 23rd, which is the Dowsett and the Puiva. This is in a location where, the Boy Scout headquarters is located. We've had problems in that area with the PVC main. It's currently under design, and we're going to go into to replace that main as soon as we can. Also, too, if you look at the end of the month, on January 28th, we also had MacArthur Street out in Waianae. That's another problematic area that's also under design right now for replacement. The leak detection people found seven leaks that we repaired before it became problematic. It turned into a major main break. So, we caught it early. Are there any questions?
Members, any questions? Okay, that brings us to the end of our regular agenda. May I have a motion to go into executive session? Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay.